Bingus. Welcome. I'm going to talk about Scouts. This is a game in progress, and it's a modded game using the Gathering Sturm mod, so if things look screwy, that's why. I'm Ray Tovari, a mod nation in the game, so if things look a little screwy, that's why. But haven't been able to set up a test game to show things in these concepts in good detail, so here they are in bad detail. Yeah, this video is about scouts. You should make them. Not because I have a perfect scout network in this game. It's far from a perfect scout network. But because I can show off some of the concepts of good scouting networks and how they function. So everybody knows that you scout your neighbors and scout their capital and their land, wherever their borders are, scout the thrones, etc., etc. That's pretty obvious. But how you use scouts in a war is you want to have your scouting network generally around 2 deep on the front. It's not universal. They just took this turn, so it doesn't have a scout in it. And don't have one here, because I wasn't able to get there in time. That's kind of a nubbin province. There's probably not anything there. I know this is not a Krun province. That's Krun, by the way. He's playing Kailasa, but that doesn't matter. So scouts. We have our scouting network 2 deep. And the reason why we have scouting network 2 deep into enemy territory, generally speaking, we want it 1 deep. Even though you can usually see what's on your border, what you want is the scouting report that tells you the province defense. Now, the enemy can dump defense in during their turn that won't show up on the report, but only if they do it that turn. And if they already have high defense, you'll be able to see it. So what this means is that you can calibrate your rating to what they have on defense. For example, we can see quite well organized, 6 to 19. Quite well organized, 6 to 19. Those are probably 6s. We can't see this province. This is very strong and well organized because it's his cap PD. But if it wasn't his cap, we'd know it anyway. So with this army, we're sending it at the cap for strategic reasons. But if I wanted to split, I could say, well, all right, 5 or 6 sacreds, maybe a few other troops. We'll take either of these easily because he doesn't have that much PD here. Alright, the reason why you want scouts 2 provinces deep is so you can see reinforcements. So when you're raiding, you want the first line of provinces scouted so you can see how easy it is to take. Now they can outplay you by messing with their PD numbers, but that doesn't mean they will. Most players don't even think about this minigame. And the other the other thing, you want it 2 provinces deep so that you could see reinforcement stacks coming up. When we weren't going straight at his capital, we had this area scouted anyway, so we could see reinforcements along the way to this fort where his main army is. It's pretty depleted for a main army, but that's where we are at this point. We've beaten each other up pretty well. So you want you want the two provinces deep from where you're raiding, and if you're deep raiding, you generally don't want to raid provinces that you can't get scouting information on. They can still go bad for you due to PD types, but generally that's how you want to do it. So you get 2 provinces deep where you're raiding. You want all the enemy's forts scouted. I think he has another fort somewhere down here that we don't have scouted, which is an issue, but that's okay. It's also turn 18. I should have better scouts than this, but that's fine. You want his reinforcement routes between forts scouted. This is 2 deep, again, but it is also a route between Kailasa and his fort on Pranda. So you want these, so when the enemy moves their armies out, you want those routes scouted. Obviously, the best thing is if you have every province in an enemy's empire scouted, but given that that's unrealistic, you'll end up cutting scouts for either infrastructure or more troops at some point, and you may not even have that many scout provinces in the first place. This force is lucky. We have national recruitable scouts for slightly more expensive. In any war, you want your scout network to be 2 provinces deep in enemy territory, plus all their forts, plus all their thrones, plus all their reinforcement routes. And that's really how you want it. You also want extra scouts in your forces, see we have them, so that you can scout more provinces. You can ping, if we wanted to hold here, have one of these scouts ping his cap, we could. I'm not paying because I pretty much know what's here, but that can bite you in the ass, but that's okay. So you want those to ping, and you want scouts to carry gems, in this case, blood slaves. So scouts are basically the fuel of any successful offensive operation. They let you plan ahead and operate ahead and generally outplay your opponent. If I didn't have any of this information, I would just be going blind. I wouldn't know if he had reinforcements here. I might have to respect this more. I wouldn't know if he had, what his PD values are, etc. So I wouldn't know if he was moving his troops up here. And one of the reasons why I was able to make this move is because he was patrolling here, and I knew he didn't have reinforcements in these areas. So I was able to be like, all right, well, if you're going to sit here and patrol while you build that fort, which he was doing, I'm going to just move to the south and threaten your cap. We'll see if that works out for me. But that's the basic scouts in an enemy empire that you're fighting that you want. Then you want a more distributed scout network for other people. First of all, because you want to see what's going on in the world. Second of all, because if you actually start fighting them, you don't want to have to shift your entire network. You just want to have to shift the scouts that are already there. So here, we're scouting the borders of Mikone, which is another empire. Not very well, but these scouts are getting a good idea of where his borders are. We should probably be scouting more. We are scouting on some of the thrones. One of the thrones, maybe. I hope. Any throne? Anyway, we should have scouts on all these independent thrones. I guess we don't. This one's where I have a scout. Alright, so the thrones near you, you want to scout. And then you see I have scouts here, small country, and up here. Because that's another use for scouting. You want to scout conflict zones because you want to see what people are actually doing. So we have, this is just a massive force waddling at the cap through PD. But we've got some iron skins going down. Do they have gems? They do not have gems. They're casting. Ooh, he has gems. So he is either doesn't have earth power up or is going to cast something that actually requires gems. He might be doing 2 Legions of Steel or Strength of Giant casts in the first turn, but if he had earth power, he wouldn't need that. And they're going with a typical, although I think incorrect, melee units blocking for archers formation. And their guys are out in the back here. Just kind of hanging out. They could get rear sniped very easily, and that'd probably be our strategy if we fought them again. So, we have eyes on this war, and what we're moving, I'm trying to anticipate these movements of Mikone and Paeonia, which is another mod nation. So, if he goes directly for the cap, I want to see that fight. I want to see how they do. If he goes for this province down here, I think that's another place he could go as a juke. He could go any of these provinces, but these 3 are the one. These 2, I think, are the most likely. And in case he patrols and Paeonia attacks him, we've got another scout coming in here, just basically going from our border with Mikone to the Mikone-Paeonia conflict. Just shifting that network over to get more utility out of it. I do need to fucking scout over here, but later. We're also scouting this conflict, although we don't see any battles. It's a little hard to predict when we can't see most of the forces, but we're scouting this Ubar-Machaka conflict so we can actually see what's going on there. And if I end up with some spare forces in time, I may, vulture a province or 2. Machaka even invited me to, but it's neither here nor there. Point is, we have our scouting we do for our own war. Then, after that, we want to get a general idea of what our neighbors are. We want to scout thrones. This is not perfect. This is a work in progress. We want to scout thrones. We want to scout conflicts. We want to scout enemy borders. Eventually, later in the game, we want scouts everywhere, pretty much. But that's not realistic early on. The other thing I want to talk about is tightening, loosening, and shifting your scouting network. Maintaining scouting networks is, an active thing. You can set guys on hide and wait, but you will eventually move them out. So when you are in a conflict, you want to tighten your scouting network around that conflict, even if that means pulling from neighbors into the conflict zone so you can get that full coverage. So you pull from your neighbors this way, like we would pull from this way and this way into this conflict if that's what we were doing. If we had a conflict breakout with Makone, we'd have the ones monitoring this conflict go up this way. We'd have more scouts go up this way. We'd shift it into the area where they're most needed. Then that will produce a hole, which you either fill with new scouts or you shift even more scouts further on. So that's shifting. Tightening is when, if you are contracting, right, then putting your scout network out 2 provinces from you, like this, we will have to pull scouts back, right? So we would have to, I'm not going to do that this turn, but because I want these provinces scouted while this army's on Kailasa, but that's if Krun was pushing us instead of us pushing him. Let's say we didn't know this, and he was pushing us. We would want to bring our scouts that were further in his empire back towards the front, like retreat them towards us, so we continue to have that 2 province buffer zone, and so we see reinforcements coming in. Loosening your scouting network is what you want to do when you end wars. So recently, we had a conflict with Makone, and then the conflict with Makone ended. We signed a deal. I killed one of his stacks. It was big but not consequential. So we signed a deal, and so what I ended up doing is I ended up loosening the scouting network where I sent these scouts further out this way. And because we no longer needed them at the conflict zone, so I wanted to get a better idea of his borders. Now that we know that this is what he's doing, fighting Paeonia, we're shifting those scouts that we had loosened, we're shifting them back towards the conflict zone so that we can get a better idea of what's happening. Then when this war with Krun gets finished off, presuming I win, which I think I'll win, but we'll see. Presuming I win, what I'll want to do is I'll take these scouts that are concentrated in this area around his empire, and I'll sort of send them out, get them back into Tir na Nog, get them over this way, find out what's over here, get eyes on this throne, get eyes on this, the Endies on this throne, probably ping this throne. So you just loosen, once your scouts are no longer being used in a conflict, they now can just spread out across the world. And then, of course, that has knock-on effects as we have scouts go north from Krun's area into Paeonia. We'll need less of these scouts. They'll be able to shift back towards Makone or shift out towards its borders. So that's just how you manage scouts. Like I said, this is not a perfect game. This is not a test game. So I don't have this perfect, beautiful scouting network. It's a little bit roughshod. It's a little bit underpowered. Could be doing better. I may not need to recruit a bunch of Slingats. But he's fighting me with naked archers, so well now. But that's just what you generally want your scouting network to look like.